Yeah, so 2 of these individuals are local from Hudson Valley, and the other 3 are not quite as local. But I'm glad that some people recognize a few of them. Cool. Okay, so to start out, I want to talk and think a little bit about the word environmental justice. So when you hear the phrase environmental justice, think about what word or words come to mind. Patrick has a board, so you can write it down on one of your Post-it notes. No pressure. It can be like whatever you think of instinctually. You can write down on a Post-it note, and then Patrick will come around and he'll stealthily take your Post-it notes, and then we'll revisit that in a minute. Yeah, so think about environmental justice for a second. Okay, so I've been thinking about that. I would love for us to start off with Dr. Dorceta Taylor. She's an incredible person. I'm obsessed with her. Dorceta Taylor is a professor at Yale University and was a professor at the University of Michigan. She was affiliated with the School of Environment and Sustainability. So she's super interested in all this stuff as well. Dr. Taylor researches food and environmental justice, so everything related to like urban agriculture, food insecurity, access to food, environmental racism, and all the really important things like that. So she does a lot of research and advocacy around it. And Dr. Taylor has also created multiple programs that support underrepresented students in having access to careers in the outdoors, which is super important and really awesome. Okay, Dr. Taylor's story is very interesting to me and really exciting because as an environmental educator, it really resonates with some of the things that inspired her growing up. So she was actually born and raised in Jamaica, and during elementary school, in her single digits, Dr. Taylor would go outside and tend to the rose garden. That was one of the tasks that she was assigned to in her family. So she would take care of the roses, sit outside, surrounded by flowers. And she described this beautiful moment where she would go outside in the mornings, and there would be waterfalls near where she was caring for the roses, and they would be all misty because it was in the morning, and there would be rolling hills that were all green and beautiful. And she felt so lucky that she got to do this task. It's surrounded by all this really beautiful nature. Then later on, when she was in high school, still in Jamaica, her teacher took her out on a field trip. And it was there that she was introduced to environmental studies as a field. And there she realized that this is what she wanted to do forever. In her words, looking at the plants and insects, they were the coolest things ever. And I'm sure that as a lot of us are environmental educators, and hearing that is super inspiring because that's kind of like, that's sort of the reaction that we're trying to get out of young people when we take them out to the woods to describe the bugs as the coolest thing ever. So as a child, Dr. Taylor heard about the prestigious Yale University, and she set a goal for herself that she really wanted to go there when she got older. And eventually, Dr. Taylor immigrated from Jamaica to the United States as a young adult, and so she got her first degree at Northeastern, and then she went to Yale, and she not only got 2 degrees from Yale, but she became a professor there. So she so far exceeded her childhood goal, which is incredible. Something else that Dr. Taylor does is advocate for environmental justice and marginalized communities specifically. So she looks at issues where Black and brown communities are experiencing more disproportionate amounts of environmental harm from things like pipelines and contaminated water. And she does research on that and popularizes how bad that is. And also, studies how a lot of white women previously had made progress where they are now obtaining more positions in sort of like the middle power and income places within an organization, but women of color are not proportionally represented within those numbers, and all women, especially women of color, are not making much progress in reaching higher pay and higher responsibility positions. And so she is broadcasting to us how that's exponentially in the environmental field. So she's a woman's woman for sure. Okay, thank you, Patrick. Okay, cool. So, I really appreciate it. So you all filled out some Post-it notes with words that came to mind when you think of environmental justice. And accountability for unethical corporate behavior. And thank you. Yes, doing right by the environment, doing the right thing for the environment. Heck yes, thank you. Equity and accessibility, leave no trace, equal access, fairness. So these are all things that I also think of when I hear environmental justice. Thank you all for doing this. I really appreciate it. In the past, I have brought up different definitions for environmental justice, and somebody or everybody always hates them. They're either controversial or like not representative enough. So I think it's really important to hear what people in the room have to say about environmental justice and to hear what an expert says. I don't know, is anybody comfortable reading this quote? No pressure. No pressure, no pressure whatsoever.
Thank
you.
Even if the policies do not intend inequity, we have to look at how outcomes are shaped differently, and it has to be an integral part of the education that students are getting.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, so Dr. Taylor is sort of putting into context what environmental justice looks like, and how something is intended one way but it affects different people in really different ways. And so like if a corporation dumping pollutants into a market goes to. So that was really, I think that was a really brilliant way of exemplifying how environmental justice works. Yeah.
Remember the pipeline in Detroit?
Yeah.
Like in Michigan. What? Michigan? Does she have a specific things that she talks about regarding that like Michigan incident where people were getting they ran this saltwater through the pipes and eroded it and poisoned it. So is that part of the issue?
Thank you. Absolutely. I think I actually heard about Dr. Taylor from stuff from Michigan, and she has a lot to say about that. And that's exactly, yeah, I think that might have been in the context that she was talking about that. Thank you. Oh yeah, this is super casual. You can do whatever you need to. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for raising your hand. Anything else? Yeah, cool. So that's Dr. Rosita Taylor. She's awesome. Okay, next we have Fran Reese. She's also incredible. She's been deceased for a few years, unfortunately, and she was local to the Hudson Valley. Yeah, has anybody heard of her? I know you've a couple people. Oh my gosh, amazing! It's like we have people from Steve Hudson here. Cool. Okay, that's really exciting. Yeah, so Fran Reese was an amazing legend here in the Hudson Valley. She pioneered the fight to protect Storm King Mountain from a really potentially harmful hydroelectric power plant here. She was also one of the founders of Scenic Hudson, which we have people here right yeah, you can judge. Scenic Hudson is an organization that started out protecting the Hudson Valley and its people, specifically with Storm King, and has expanded to be more educational and all kinds of wonderful things. And Fran Reese also, one of her biggest accomplishments is that people attribute the initiation of the modern day environmental movement to the work that she did and how she sort of perpetuated ordinary citizens creating environmental change. Cool. Oh, but wait, hydroelectric power is renewable, so why was Reese so opposed to it? Does anybody know why this plant was so bad? I'm asking because this was my reaction. Yeah.
Because you wind up tearing down a large part of the mountain and building structures into it. That would cause some environmental damage. Plus, it would kind of turn into an eyesore if you burn hydroelectric plants, I guess.
Thank you. So you knew all the answers last time too. Thank you. I was gonna say, if nobody knew, I was gonna say, I'll give you a hint. The picture behind it would look much less cute if the plant was a thing.
It's also not stable.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you.
Aside from all of those reasons.
Yes, not stable. It would be ugly.
Dams are not that great. Like building dams are not that great
Yeah.
for the environment.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, so dams unfortunately block fish populations from migrating. They also change all kinds of things about the natural balance of the water, like temperature, chemistry, composition, and the silt flow, which like the sediment that's flowing through a river naturally. And this can all affect the natural balance of the plants and the wildlife that resides healthily in the river. And obviously this would require blowing up an entire face of the mountain, like you said, and the view from Breakneck could be much less desirable.
This also pertain to anything? Like this sort of damage? Like any type of plant?
That's a good question. That's a really good question. Probably. Yeah, especially a really large scale one. Because I know I've seen like hydroelectric dams that have been on a much smaller scale, and they have like steps for the salmon to migrate, and that seemed better. And we're going to talk a little bit about how this company was consolidated at Edison.
Con Ed.
Yeah. Was the name of the company that is trying to build a plant. They did not have environmental concerns as their priority when they were building it. I think there are much more ethical ways to do it.
Okay.
But yeah, I know it's interesting. But yeah, there's definitely a question of the harm or the impact to any energy plant that's being built for sure. Yeah. Yeah, so if anybody was here 2 weeks ago, which I know a few of you were, Nicole did an amazing job telling the story of the Storm King Mountain, and it's the fight to protect it and the area from this really destructive hydroelectric plant. And so in the 1960s, free and Greece and a band of loyal and concerned citizens got together and countered this proposition to build a hydroelectric plant. Through those 17 years, they experienced many wins and many setbacks, legislative and things like that. One of the wins was creating scenic Hudson. Which you mentioned before, was initiated to protect Storm King and the Hudson Valley from environmental degradation. And now it's expanded to be a really awesome place that employs lots of cool people and protects more than just the river and Storm King from environmental degradation. So she helped found that, which was an amazing repercussion for this whole 17-year debacle. And Free Greece set a precedent for individuals to take a stance against corporations that they believe are causing harm to the environment. Before she kind of did that right here, nobody really felt empowered as an individual to stand up against a powerful corporation that was rooted in money and seemed to have a lot of power. And so she enabled a lot of people in the future to have the power to stand up and do that, which is awesome. And indirectly, as a result of the momentum of the movement that Free Greece created, the Clean Water Act was passed. And the power plant, the Storm King Mountain, that was purchased, was eventually donated back to the New York parks. And and so that was the end of the 17-year battle, and the mountain became a park for us to enjoy and to hike on and have fun with instead of destroying the fish. It is across the river. It's like across from Cold Spring and Breakneck Bridge. It's on the other side of it. A little softer here. Does anybody feel comfortable or empowered to read this quote by Free Greece? Oh wait, sorry. This is a picture of her signing the bill that transferred ownership of Storm King Mountain from the power plant people to the park. So she got to sign it because she's so cool and important. Does anybody feel comfortable reading this quote? No pressure.
It never occurred, I guess, to the power plant developers that anybody would think it was a perfect site to enjoy and to leave to the future to enjoy. That kind of autocratic approach, and also that everything was made for man to do what he pleased with, and I mean man generically, just didn't go down.
Thank you. Yeah, so that's kind of speaking to how a lot of people realize that because they can do something, maybe they feel like they shouldn't do it. And she's telling us that maybe that's not as much the case. And noting that the developers did not really care that much about the environment when they were creating this plan. Cool. Okay, so next we have somebody named Winona Duke. Has anybody heard of her? She had a lot to do with the pipeline in the Dakotas. Since this is the parks, there are limits to what I can say about the pipeline, unfortunately. So this is Winona Duke. She's a Native American land rights activist. She's an incredible person. She also is a politician, economist, writer, speaker, author. She's done pretty much everything. She's of the Ojibwe people and the White Earth Reservation. So that's located in Minnesota. And the Ojibwe people make up a huge percentage of indigenous folks residing in North America. So in the Great Lakes area, and then north of that is where those folks reside. And so she is an advocate for environmental justice, renewable energy, sustainable food systems, and protecting indigenous traditional culture and land. She's done really awesome things. Okay, now we have a game called Which is Actually Wild Rice. Okay, I can't quite reach it, but we have Trader Joe cultivated wild rice. Do we think that this is actually wild rice?
No.
Or no? No, it's not. It also says cultivated, which it has to now because of some legislation that Winona Duke pushed for. Yeah, no, this is fake. Okay, what about this cool looking thing? Yeah, maybe. Yeah, no, this is real wild rice. This came from Winona Duke's website. This is what her wild rice looks like. It's amazing. She is awesome. What about organic wild rice? This is something that I've seen it at Food Town. I think it would be at Whole Foods as well. Yeah, real wild rice. Maybe not quite as much. Yeah, this is not. It was grown in Lundberg, which is in California. So we'll talk about why that is not authentic. And then here we have pipeline-free Wyoming, 100% pure, natural from under the earth. What do you think? Yeah. Yes, this is legitimate wild rice. This Honor the Earth is actually an organization that Winona Duke helped to found. And yeah, that is real wild rice. It's awesome. So the point of this is that wild rice has been largely altered and co-opted by non-Indigenous folks, which we'll talk about in a bit. Yeah, so on the White Earth Reservation, where Winona Duke worked and lived for much of her life, she did a lot of things like recovering native lands from pipelines and recovering native culture and important traditional things from being altered and changed sort of past the point of recognition. And so true wild rice is called Winona, and it's actually native here. Rice and wild rice is, I believe, the only grain that is native to the Americas, to North America, which is really awesome. It makes it sort of even more important to protect and to care for. And the process that Indigenous folks have created for harvesting wild rice is really intentional and meaningful to Indigenous culture. And so it involves two people being in a canoe. The person in the back is steering, the person in the front has sort of two poles with which they'll gently bend the stalks of wild rice, and the rice gently falls into the canoe, and apparently it makes a very soothing and really important ritual sound and process, and it's really beautiful and something that I really appreciate. So this happened in Minnesota, where Winona Duke lives, and in the 1950s there were some students at the University of Minnesota who saw this process. They were not Indigenous folks. And they were like, oh, what is this really awesome superfood, this really cool grain that's delicious and super nutritional and is native to here. Let's see if we can change it and make it cheaper to produce and then sell to people. So they did that, and they took the rice and did a lot of scientific experiments on it to figure out how to genetically modify it and make it easier to grow and to harvest and to produce in larger amounts. And unfortunately, this depleted a lot of the nutritional value and the cultural value behind wild rice. And so as it started to happen, Winona Duke and other people who lived, other Ojibwe folks who lived in the White Earth Reservation wanted to counter this sort of appropriation of sacred wild rice. And so they got involved legislatively. And so I mentioned that Winona Duke is an economist and politician, so this knowledge really helped her to counter the appropriation of wild rice. And so they were only so powerful, and so the spread of this fake wild rice started to go into California and very far away from where it was natively grown in the watershed of the Great Lakes. And so rice that is farmed and harvested in fields rather than in water, Indigenous folks sort of sadly nicknamed it tame rice instead of wild rice because it had deviated so far from the natural form of wild rice. And so there's actually a lawsuit that the Ojibwe people filed against a company in California who were seriously falsely advertising this rice. They had a picture of two Indigenous folks on a canoe harvesting, but this was taking place in California, very far away from the native site of wild rice. And they shipped it off to Minnesota and packaged it as a local Minnesota product, which was a lie. And so this sort of initiated publicizing false advertising. So the Ojibwe people were responsible for countering those sort of fake attempts. And in 2018, wild rice actually obtained its own rights. And so now, because of Winona Duke and her people, if somebody tries to produce and sell wild rice, they need to get an environmental impact permit and submit it, which is really interesting. And Winona Duke certainly never would have thought that she would need to fight so hard on behalf of rice. This was amidst many of the other things that she was working on at the time. So I really admire her fight to preserve the integrity of this crop. She's awesome. Cool. Okay, and now we have some words by Winona Duke. Is anybody comfortable? Really? No pressure. Cool.
I read it.
Thank you. Thank you.
In our community, we don't have a lot of wealthy people, but we have a lot of drums. We have a lot of songs. We have great maple syrup. We have knowledge that is 10,000 years old, and we have the wealth of our relations to each other and to the natural world.
Yeah, thank you. She has a lot of really brilliant words. If you will introduce by her, they're all really, really incredible. And I really look up to Winona Duke to teach me about Indigenous culture. In a way that I can support her and recognize all the awesome things that she's done. So her words, I think, are really, really beautiful, and I love her. And she has a lot of books and articles. Okay, so we're transitioning over to Patti Modia. Patti Modia self-describes herself as the world's first backpacking queen. So she's at the intersection. She's at the intersection of drag and the environmental justice. And Patti Modia is super inspiring on social media. You can find her at Patti Modia. By the way, Patti Modia is a pun on the on the outdoor company. Thank you. So this is Patti Modia. She's incredible. So Patti Modia is portrayed by somebody named Win Wiley. He was super outdoorsy, has always loved skiing, through hiking, camping, backpacking, and all those things. And now Patti Modia and Win Wiley describe themselves as you can find them in high heel boots dancing on top of a mountain, which I think is absolutely beautiful and a great depiction of joy. And so Patti Modia uses she, he, and they pronouns. And so because of their femme identity, I thought it would be awesome to be able to include Patti Modia here as a really inspirational woman for the environment. And so a little story about Win Wiley. That his friends and community accepted him as gay conditionally, as long as he didn't sort of show a super effeminate side. And so he described himself as having to experience a decade of being straight passing. And then after that, he wanted to rebel and embrace his feminine identity. And so that's when he started doing drag. And finding the intersection between femininity and the outdoors. And only 2 years ago, Patti Modia was created. He was like, I can't believe nobody has thought of this pun before. It's super awesome and funny. And so now Patti Modia uses her space on social media to inspire folks who have previously been denied access to the outdoors. So her social media is like super empowering and inclusive, and specifically to folks in the LGBTQ community, Black and brown folks, queer folks, fat folks, and anybody who has previously experienced barriers to getting outside. And so her Instagram is absolutely incredible, and she's really outspoken and awesome. And a few words about intersectional environmentalism, which I can read. Intersectional environmentalism lets us weave in our humanity, our culture, our queerness, and our color into environmental work. We tell ourselves that all these issues are separate, but I think the magic happens when you intersect one thing with another. If you look at any space where people are making change, you will find queer people, you will find people of color, and you will find indigenous people, and you'll find women. So I love that she talks about the magic of intersectionality and everybody's identities having to do with one another. So this is just something to reflect on and think about for the last little bit as I continue to talk. But you can think about which identities you hold, and if, whether or not you've thought about how your identities affect you, and also work together to influence the things that you do and experience. And that's something to reflect on. And if you want to talk about it afterward, I'm happy to. Or if anybody has any thoughts now, no pressure. I always love talking about intersectionality. Okay, and so last, we have Liz Putnam. She is also a Hudson Valley local legend. Liz Putnam is responsible for my stipend. Thank you. She's really cool. Yeah, so she founded the Student Conservation Association, or the SCA, and she emphatically believes in the power of young people to influence environmental change for the future. Yeah, she's adorable. So something that she said is, this fragile earth is hurting. Young people today have so many serious challenges that need to be faced head on. I believe it is vitally important for the young to realize that they can each do something positive with their lives, that they can go for their dream, whatever that is. The world needs our help more than ever before, and we all are needed to work together for the future of this planet. We love teamwork. Yeah, so in the 1950s, Liz Putnam became inspired by a campaign, or an article written by some influential environmentalists back then. It was called Close the National Parks, and so at the time, they were experiencing a huge cut in funding, and the parks were becoming sort of run down, and like the trails were becoming overgrown, and the parks were not super accessible or safe for people to enjoy. And so she read this article, Close National Parks, and was like, I'm wondering if there is a better approach, if we can care for the national parks and fulfill our need for enjoying the outdoors without cutting it off. And so Liz Putnam went to Vassar College up the road, and so she created a thesis which proposed the Student Conservation Association. It was modeled after the Civilian Conservation Association, which happened a few years before, and was also sort of a parks rehabilitation employment opportunity for for folks. So she modeled it off of that. And after a very long time where she experienced a lot of sexism and negative things, in 1964 the SCA was officially incorporated as a nonprofit. And again, it was to rehabilitate the parks while also providing young people with experience in getting into the environmental world. Liz Putnam especially wanted to provide women with the opportunity to get involved in this. She wanted the SCA to be a gateway for women looking to be environmental stewards because back then, in the 50s and 60s, women and people of color were more excluded from environmental work than they are today. So she was really hoping this to be a gateway for those individuals. However, when a man heard her express this wish for women to be involved, he said, can you imagine anything more silly than a woman in a ranger hat? So 30 years after he made that very insulting comment, the National Park Service awarded Liz Putnam her very own Parks Ranger hat, and they gave her an honorary Parks Ranger title, and so her hat is a prized possession to this day. She's also, hence the picture of the hat, but that's why you were laughing, I understand now. So at age 66, not only did Liz Putnam found the Student Conservation Association, she is an alum of it. And when she was 66 years old, the SCA sent a recovery corps to Yellowstone, Wyoming, because there were wildfires, a lot of them. They were really bad. And she was like, I cannot not do this. So she sent in an application to the organization that she founded. And when she received her acceptance letter, she skipped all the way up the driveway and back into the house because she's an incredible person. So she fought fires at age 66 in the organization that she founded. Cool. Yeah, so that was Liz Putnam. Thank you, Richard. So, after we've heard a lot about all these different awesome women trailblazers and all the different issues that they pioneered, we can think about which environmental initiatives we're all passionate about. So, including education, food access, sustainable farming, indigenous land restoration, environmental justice, volunteering, energy, and accessibility. And Patrick is going to come around with a board with all these topics on it. And so you can mark down, you can just draw like a tally or whatever on one of the post-its with one of the markers that you have on any of the issues that you feel passionate about, and all of them, more than one, if you are passionate about more than one. So while Patrick is coming around, we can recap a little bit. So this is Dr. Dorcita Taylor, and she holds institutions accountable for environmental justice. In the middle, local granaries enable individuals to protect the earth and its people. And on the end, Winona Duke, protect indigenous land and culture. And Patti Modia inspires people to go outside who have been historically unable. And Liz Putnam founded the SCA to empower young people to be stewards of the earth. Cool. Yeah. So thank you, everybody. Also, thank you to Two-Way Brewing, who is here somewhere. Again, these are all the people that we talked about today, and that's the logo of Two-Way Brewing. Thank you all. We are the Parks and Tijuana Golf Education Center. And if you're curious, I learned these things from very reputable sources that are here on SMU. And these are our incredible women again. But yeah, thank you so much. That's all. And if you have anything that you're thinking or any thoughts or reflections, I'm happy to hear them.